Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on advisory boards for innovation operations at academic institutions. I'm Kirsten Loita of Osage University Partners, and I head up our university relations efforts here at OUP. I'm going to be our moderator for today, and we'll go to our next slide where we're going to introduce our fantastic panelists. I'm really glad that they are joining us here today to talk about their advisory boards, and I'll have them each introduce themselves. Kelly, I'll start with you.
Good to see everyone. Thanks for having us, Kirsten. Kelly Sexton. I'm Associate Vice President for Research, Innovation Partnerships, and Economic Impact at the University of Michigan.
Thanks, Kelly. Kevin.
Yes, I'm Kevin Taylor, and I'm a Senior Associate Vice President, and I've had the good fortune of leading Ohio State's Technology Commercialization Office for 7 years.
Thanks, Kevin. And Doug.
Morning. I'm Doug Hochstead. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and Executive Director of Tech Launch Arizona at the University of Arizona. Been here about a little over 13 years now, and actually started back at U of M, where Kelly is.
So many people come from U of M. It's wonderful.
Sure.
A terrific place. We're really glad that all of you are here today to talk about these advisory boards. Before we dive into our subject, we'll go to the next slide. We do want to talk about a few logistics. This webinar is being recorded. We are not going to have any slides this particular webinar. So we will be sending out this recording for this webinar to everyone who registered afterwards. For those of you who are at our partner institutions, you can find it on our partner portal, and there's instructions here about how you can find it on our partner portal. It will also be available via our YouTube channel as well. Again, we will be providing those links to everyone who registered for the webinar within the next week. You can also see a bunch of our upcoming webinars on this particular slide. So on September 24th, we're going to have our annual Ask a VC webinar. Invitations for this will be going out soon, where you can come and ask any questions you'd like of a VC. So two of our managing partners, Mark Singer and Bill Harrington, will be joining us for this, and we just answer any and all questions that you may have about venture capital, current state of the industry, etc. on this particular webinar. In October, we are planning a webinar that will be focused on data center silicon photonics on this particular industry area, which is quite of interest to us. And then in late October, early November, we're going to be doing a webinar on corporate accelerators. We have a few other webinars that are coming up as well that you'll be hearing about from us soon. We do have two QR codes here that will lead you to our YouTube channel as well as to our partner portal. As I mentioned, the partner portal is only available to our academic institution partners. We will go to the next slide. A short intro on OUP for those of you who do not know us. We're a venture capital fund that partners with academic institutions to invest in their startups, typically by exercising participation rights available through their licenses. For those of you who don't know what a participation right is, it's the ability to invest in future rounds of a company on the same terms and conditions as other investors. We do have recommended language on participation rights if this is not something that you're currently including in your license agreements. If you'd like to have that, please just reach out to us. As a part of this partnership with our academic institutions, they do share in a portion of our profits and receive programmatic support on tech transfer and academic startups, including webinars like this. We are now on our fourth fund here at OUP. We've made investments in over 150 companies. I think it's approaching 160 now, in all areas of deep sciences. And if we go to the next slide, you can just see a smattering of the companies that we've invested in over time and the different areas those particular companies in. We're always happy to talk about our model, so please do just reach out to us if you have any questions for us. At the end of this presentation today or panel today, we will pull up a slide that will include our email addresses, so you can feel free to reach out to us that way. I think we're actually going to take down the slides now. Today's discussion is going to be a Q&A about this particular subject matter. And so I have a lot of questions written up for our panelists here, but we also welcome your questions. So if you are going to ask questions, please do so in the Q&A tool that is in the toolbar. For me, it's under the three dots under Zoom. You have to go in there and pull it up. So please just use that tool. That is how I monitor the questions coming in and kind of figure them out about the order that we should put them in, considering the outline that I have for our panelists and what we're going to be talking about. So with that, we will dive into our subject matter. And I'm going to actually start out with a question that's just basically a just short description. I'd like each of you to describe your advisory boards for your innovation operations at your institution. So, Kelly, I'll start with you.
Fantastic. I'm going to complicate the answer just a bit because at U of M we never like to have just one of something. So our office actually has three boards, advisory boards that we manage. I'm going to primarily for this webinar be talking about our National Advisory Board, but I wanted to briefly mention the other two because they serve distinct purposes. We have an investment advisory board that is there to advise our office on specific investment decisions that we are making around a venture capital fund that we oversee. So that's our investment advisory board, primarily startup founders, people with investment experience. Then we have a strategic advisory board. So the fund that we manage, we've raised primarily through philanthropy. Our strategic advisory board is comprised of individuals and representatives from companies who have made significant donations to enable that fund. The fund is called Accelerate Blue. These are people who are typically alumni. They're very passionate about the university and innovation and entrepreneurship. They're there to give us general advice about the direction of the fund, to help us with fundraising, and especially to open up new connections for our portfolio of startups. Then there's our National Advisory Board. So this board was formed over 20 years ago, and it was actually created by our then university president. And she hand-selected the board at the time from leaders from industry, venture capital. Today we've added economic development professionals to the group, but the charge is the same. Advise the university on how to be excellent at research translation and commercialization. So this is the charge of our National Advisory Board, which has now been in place for over 20 years.
Thanks, Kelly. Kevin.
Yeah, so our advisory board is actually associated with the Ohio State Innovation Foundation and call it OSIF. It is it's the repository, if you will, for all of our intellectual property. Our patents are assigned to OSIF. Our deals are done out of OSIF. Litigation takes place out of OSIF. And so our board is actually more of a traditional board for an affiliate. It's focused on governance, but it's also focused on best practices and ensuring that we are meeting the mission of the entity. I will say there are advisory boards throughout the university, and many of the ones that are focused on innovation are closer to the faculty level and hosted within colleges. So the College of Arts and Sciences, for example, it has an advisory board, and there are others that have those. I will also say that we're beginning to look at investing in tech translation as well as direct investment. And as that moves forward, we will add advisory boards. But for now, my focus today is going to be through the lens of having a board of directors overseeing an affiliate that really handles all of the business of tech transfer at Ohio State.
Thanks, Kevin. Doug.
Not to show my my heritage at Michigan, but similar situation. We do have a small board for our seed fund called the Wildcat Seed Fund. But the one I'm focusing on is equivalent to Michigan's National Advisory Board. We call it the TAB, the TLA Advisory Board. It's made up of people from mostly around the region, a lot in the city Tucson, but also expanding into Phoenix because we have a lot of presence in Phoenix, and then a few people nationally around the country, and basically formed it based on my experience at Michigan with the NAB. And that's what drove me to create something that was really advisory for our unit.
Great. Thanks. And for full disclosure is that I am on each of these advisory boards. And one of the reasons that I thought this would be a particularly interesting subject to the innovation operations at academic institutions is because I get to see the differences that happen between each of these advisory boards. and also the similarities. And I love serving on these advisory boards because you hear such specific things about institutions, but you also get to see the commonalities across institutions as well as what it is that they're struggling with, what they're working on, what their areas of focus are, what their strategic areas are, et cetera. So for me, it's a fan, being now outside of the academic institutions, it's a fascinating way to stay really involved at the academic institutions, but also help them with what it is that I see across the institutions themselves. So just wanted for full disclosure to mention that. And obviously we're focusing really, there were a number of advisory boards mentioned, but we're really focusing on these advisory boards associated with tech transfer innovation operations at the institutions. Doug, question to you. Was there a problem or gap that led your institution to create this advisory board?
Well, let me start with saying I want to sit in on the webinar where you just talk about the differences between all of our boards. um, yeah, there was. So when TLA launched, I got to think about this now, a little over 13 years ago. Um, uh, the tech transfer organization here was not well respected. And it's not necessarily their fault. It was the university's focus and a whole bunch of things. So we had two primary things that we needed to drive. One was within our external ecosystem, build up the credibility of what the university can and should be doing. And with the internal ecosystem, build up the credibility within faculty and staff that we were a responsive organization that would work well together. So building this advisory board was the goal, was part of that goal of trying to influence both internal and external people. And at the time we had several internal people on it. That has changed over time to become primarily external. In fact, entirely external now. But the goal was to create advocates both internally and externally. And at the time, it was almost exclusively a show and tell type group where we would get up and talk about all the efforts we were doing and explain how we were doing it and the benefits we could bring and getting them to go push that message out. And that's changed and morphed over time into more strategic considerations. But that's basically what we were trying to address when we created it.
Great, thanks, Doug. Kevin, was there a problem or gap that your institution had that led to it?
Yes, because we're a state institution, there were limitations on the type of the council that we could engage. There was a level of oversight of our activities that, while could be beneficial, was also, I think, created friction and challenge. So the university created an affiliate to give us more flexibility, and we could kind of engage the right talent, no matter where it was in Ohio or elsewhere. It also gave us an opportunity to hold equity and to address some issues that the university otherwise would face. But that said, I think a lot of what Doug described would also fit with OSIF.
Thanks, Kevin and Kelly.
Yeah. So, the board, its formation predates me, but I think it was really the desire on the part of the university president to say, this is very important to the institution. I want to place emphasis on it. And I think the fact that, she, hand selected the initial membership was very important. That was something that kind of over time had drifted. And when I came into the role, really wanted to encourage, our various university presidents currently on the fourth, to also, provide names and of, trusted advisors that they would want to see on the board. Also invite, key, deans and other stakeholders because I want this to be a board, yes, to advise our office, but I also want them to be trusted advisors on tech transfer for university leadership, the people that they will call when they have a question. So that's also something that I keep in mind is it's not just for me, it's for the institution.
Absolutely. And I see that all the time in your meetings as well, Kelly, with the different people coming in and joining and discussing things around that. Kevin, I'm going to ask about the mission of your advisory board. You know, you guys, you each have kind of talked about the mission of your advisory boards, but I'd love for you to kind of specifically state what the mission of your advisory board is. And then also, has that mission evolved over time and what that might have looked like if that's the case?
Sure, sure. So if you look at the mission of OSIF, actually, if you go to the Code of Regulations, it is a very, very, very broadly scoped mission. And you can think of it in terms of anything related to innovation that we would ever want to do can be done through OSIF. And the formation of the board or formation of OSIF and the board predates me for many years. It, I think it served a purpose of engaging the local community and people who had a great interest in Ohio State and how we were performing innovation and commercialization to be involved and then to go out into the community and be advocates. I'll also say the board has gone from it's at different levels of being functional, quite frankly. There were periods of time where there might be just one board meeting a year. Um, when I became president, we embraced the Code of Regulations. We provided structure, and we have 4 board meetings each year. And with that, I over time shifted our board from being local because with that local engagement, you also have, quite frankly, a lot of self-interest, and that's okay. But that's a challenge, and there are a lot of politics because we're in the capital city of Columbus, and Ohio State's very much integrated into the politics and the community, as you'd expect, and that's a great thing. That's a great thing. But we had an opportunity to bring in national scale talent, and our vision was to have OSIF be best in class and to absorb and engage the brightest minds, the most experienced people on our board to help us become kind of one of the best. And it didn't matter kind of what that meant as far as change goes, we would embrace it. And so now we have a board of national experts with relevant areas of expertise around intellectual property, and deal making and running high performing offices. And so now the mission, I would say, if I had to just shift it a little bit, is really excellence in technology transfer and innovation. And one more thing I'll add is, you know, within the university and within the community, the voices from others outside of the Columbus area ring a little bit truer sometimes. And Stanford is frequently brought up in our innovation and kind of broader innovation ecosystem as being a model. And so we're blessed to have had people with that pedigree and that lends credibility. And when they say we're doing this right, you know, people listen, and that's helpful.
And that's helpful. Great. Thanks, Kevin. Kelly, mission of your advisory board and how has that evolved over time?
So our board is there to advise us and university leadership on our strategy, how to be better, how to be preeminent, how to be the best at what we do, and to match the research excellence of the university. So building on a couple of things that Kevin said, it has also been important for us. We definitely want to have some Michigan-based people on the board. Our economic development engagement and that aspect of our strategy is really important. So we do have a significant local presence, but it is a national advisory board. So making sure that we have people with the relevant expertise, and it's basically what Kevin said, in different corners of the country is really important to helping the board be able to open up new connections for our office, be able to, really help us get into ecosystems where we don't have a physical presence. That's been, really important to us, and, can provide some examples of how that's been helpful as we get, a bit further into the conversation. One of the it's like not on, the onboarding document that I give to board members about like what's the mission. But we're all in higher, well, except for Kirsten, but the rest of us, we're all mostly in higher ed, right? And so change and turnover is inevitable. So one of the underappreciated missions of the National Advisory Board that I get to remind them about from time to time is helping to onboard new university leadership and orient them to our work. These board meetings are great opportunities, to bring in, academic leaders and especially the new ones to help them understand what we're working on, what our challenges are, what our strategy is, and then to have that, external challenging and validation to help drive a rich conversation. So, for me, I think I'm on my fourth vice president for research and innovation that I've reported to in my 8.5 years at the University of Michigan, and fourth university president. So the board's been like a really invaluable bridge because many of them have been with the organization, for a very long time and can bring this outside perspective about the work we're doing. So that's something I didn't fully appreciate as part of the mission of the board, but it's been very important function of the board.
Really valid points there. Thanks, Kelly. Doug.
I really like, Kelly, what you said about the almost like specific explicit mission to onboard leadership. We've had similar issues with changes in leadership over the last 10 years. And it's happened, but it's happened because they took it upon themselves, not because they thought it was part of their role on our board. So I like the idea of making it more explicit. So I appreciate you sharing that. For us, our mission is really threefold, and it's for us to solicit advice from them on our operations, on maybe some plans or strategic things that we're implementing. On if we're creating a new strategic plan, sharing that with them in a draft form, getting input, getting thoughts. The second part of that is to create advocates for TLA, both internally and externally. And we want them to be able to answer questions about us and advocate for us with both the faculty and the leadership. And then there's a third one, which is to leverage relationships. And it's a little bit like Kelly, I think, was saying about the people outside the state, being able to get connections into those ecosystems. We want to be able to leverage those relationships in different ways. I think how it's evolved is when we started, like I said earlier, it was primarily a review committee and, just creating these advocates. And it's moved much more into the advice solicitation, and just the give and take discussions that we'll have twice a year.
Thank you. Well, all of this was context setting for the rest of the webinar. So I appreciate you all going into this. I think that will help everyone with everything else that we were talking about. We're going to get much more into the nitty gritty now of how these boards actually work, how you set them up, etc. So that was mission and purpose. Now we're going to talk about composition and structure of the board. And Kelly, first question to you: how do you identify, recruit, and vet board members, and what are the mix of backgrounds typically that you have been on your particular national advisory board?
Yeah. So, I was really fortunate when I came into the role to have a very strong board. And so, for 8 years, 8.5 years now, my role there has been to kind of, refresh and bring some new energy and new perspective onto the board. But just, with tremendous gratitude for people who have served on the board for many years and have just brought like a wealth of contextual history, to the board. In general, we want people from industry, particularly the industries that are, aligned with our research enterprise and our licensing. We want people, some mix of people who are conversant in IP and licensing. We have had at times, people from a university. So for many years, we had legendary Jack Turner from MIT was on our board because, like Kevin was saying, people say, well, how how are Stanford, how are MIT doing this? Currently one of our answers to that question is, having Kirsten on the board and, the experience she brought from, the Stanford OTL and of course this, incredible national vantage point that you have, from your work at OUP as well as sitting on all of our boards, really brings that university perspective. For vetting, it's, meetings, I'll meet with them, make sure they understand the purpose and the intent of the board. I have them meet with our board chair, who, I should probably mention the role of a board chair. This is, our board has a chair. They help run the meetings. I preview the agendas with them. And this is just a, really valuable person to make sure that we're making, I never want to waste the board's time, that we're making really efficient use of that time. And, their role is to like challenge me on the agendas, on the timing, on everything we're doing and ask questions. And I've been just incredibly fortunate to have two unbelievable board chairs in my time at Michigan. Like these people are just beyond wonderful. And so the board chair helps with the vetting. The board also helps grow the board. So they make recommendations and referrals to me of people that we should consider joining. One of the things that I'm looking for, in addition to all the things we've said, is the University of Michigan is a big place. So it's also ideal if the board members can be helping us connect dots even on our campus. So there's bonus points if we can identify a board recruit who also serves on another important board, internal board within the university. So one of our big colleges or our academic medical center or an advisory board to the president. Those internal connections can be really helpful because when they're in a meeting and hearing about a new initiative coming out of college, they're like, well, interesting innovation partnerships is also working in this area, make sure you're collaborating. So that's been something that we, I didn't fully appreciate 8.5 years ago, but I've learned is even more important when looking for board members.
Thanks, Kelly. Same question to you, Doug.
Um, I would say that, on the question of what's our makeup of it, most of them are business leaders, VCs, or other investors. And the one thing that we've not actively done, which already is an idea from this, is including local economic development leaders. I think that's an interesting idea. We generally discuss changes among the board. So our board isn't huge. I'll talk about that later, but it's when somebody steps off, we don't have specific term limits. When somebody steps off, it's a discussion on the board to say, hey, what do we think we need? What's missing from this group? And then often vetting the people either that they bring forward or that we bring forward. And so that's how we handle the changing and et cetera.
Thanks, Doug. Kevin, anything to add about how you identify, recruit, and vet your board members?
I would just add, and this will come later as well, when we look for board members, again, at this point, it is they need to be subject matter experts because we need their help and their insights. They need to be well connected because it helps us get better. The more people we can kind of bring into the fold and of ideas. And they also have to be service minded. And it may come up later, but we don't compensate our board members. They are people who love what we do. They love universities. They love seeing technologies make it out into the market and impact people's lives, and that's who we need to serve along with us.
Great. And you just brought up a great point right now, Kevin. Do any of you compensate your board members?
No.
No.
No,
No.
and I think to Kevin's point, most of our board members, therefore, and it's probably true for all of us, tend to be alumni. Like they care about innovation entrepreneurship and they care about the specific university they're donating their time to. The exception there is Kirsten, who cares about university tech transfer writ large, and wants to help all of us succeed. That's the kind of phenotype of a person who's willing to travel on their own dime and, provide their incredibly valuable time and service to the university. Usually we're tugging on the heartstrings of an alumni to help us with this work.
Great. Well, next question to Kevin. How large is your board? What are term lengths, or do you have term lengths? And Doug, you already started addressing this as well. And then how do you handle turnover or succession, which Doug, you also went a little into. So.
So the structure of our board and the size, all of that is really detailed in our code of regulations, which of course we can change over time. Currently, we have 9 members stipulated, and 2 types make up the 9 members. We have university directors, and there are 4 university directors, and those are ex officio positions. So the VPR, the CFO of the university, myself, I'm sorry, the leader of the tech transfer office, and then our senior associate general counsel who works with kind of the Office of Research essentially. And then we have 5 public directors, and those public directors then, again, we're targeting people with expertise that kind of rounds out kind of the board based on the mission and based on what we're trying to improve upon. Term lengths are stipulated. They're 2 years. I actually think 2 years is maybe a little short, although I don't know, our board members may feel otherwise, but I think 3 is a little bit of a better number. It's better to have an odd number. And I think I think we have room to improve on succession planning. And I serve on other boards, and I think really getting skilled and I'll say strategic about how are you timing the overlap of board members and always building a bridge kind of going forward to the talent that you need to have on the board when someone is going to be ending their service, let's say in a year or two. And so I think that's something that we need to definitely improve upon, but it is essential. It's essential to do that effectively.
Great. Thanks. Doug, same question to you.
Well,
How
I've
large is
touched on
how
this.
large is the board in term lengths? You already
Yeah,
answered most of this, but
yeah.
you did
So
not answer how large the board is.
our board, the goal is around 10 people. Right now we're at 8. Um, we actually, to go back to the term length, we actually did start with the concept of term length. And I think we were at 2 years as well, Kevin. But at one point, I brought it up with the board, and I was like, how do you guys want to form? And almost everyone said they don't need a term length, that they want to serve longer. And as Kelly kind of said earlier, the length of service actually helps us in a lot of ways. So that's it.
Thanks. Kelly.
The letters say 3 years, but if someone is not coming and not engaging, that's when they get the letter at 3 years. The plaque, we send them a plaque that says thank you for your service. And but for the vast majority of the board members, they're staying on beyond 3 years because they're engaging and showing up. I mean, honestly, something I do struggle with, but is for the most part, it's really good to have this continued service. But it does then become a conversation when it's probably time for someone to rotate off. It's really easy when they've been, consistently missing meetings or unengaged, but that's work and that's a meeting you have to schedule and a conversation you have to have. That's again where, sometimes I punt that to the board chair. So another reason to have an excellent board chair, they can help you with the rotation as well.
Thanks, Kelly. How often does the board meet, Kelly, and what does a typical meeting agenda look like?
Yeah. The board meets twice a year, in person on campus, spring and fall. And Typically we do a dinner the night before. So we'll kind of, start at 5:30 or 6 p.m. the evening before. The next morning we convene at 8:30 and the meetings run until about 1:30 or 2. I love this question, kind of thinking about it. It's changed a lot over time. Like when I was, first in the office, we spent a lot of time talking about our patent budget and funding and resourcing of the office. Fortunately, we've mostly been able to move away from that, thanks to a lot of work and advocacy on the part of the board. And so now we're talking about bigger strategic priorities for the office. So we might talk about our new startup creation program that we're running, and here's the idea for it, and 6 months later, here's what we're learning, and getting feedback. We might spend time talking about our startup fund, giving them an update, asking for their advice and help about our fundraising strategy, seeing if anyone wants to raise their hand and, host an event in their, in their geography, seeing if they've got ideas for people we need to talk to. One thing we did at our last board meeting that I think we're going to try to incorporate in some way moving forward is also having so in this case, we had a company who had selected the university for a significant research collaboration. We had them come and talk about why they chose to work with the University of Michigan. And that was really valuable and incredible to hear from, a company about how they're thinking about universities when they're looking at us. What are they seeing? Where did we score well? What do we need to improve? So I want to continue that and have, maybe it's a startup founder that worked with us come back and describe the experience. I think there's some more ways to incorporate that. Another aspect is at the dinner the night before, we will typically, we try to set aside 20 or 30 minutes after the orders are taken and before dinner comes for them to hear from one of our either inventors or a startup company founder. That's more of a presentation of their work. But I really do think the format of having companies share more about their experience and perspective is something we want to do more of moving forward.
Thanks, Kelly. Kevin, how often does your board meet?
So we meet on a quarterly basis, and again, this is all called out in the Code of Regulations. And but three of them are just calls. So we'll have a 90-minute Teams call, and we go through a set agenda. We may have actions that are required for the board to take. We provide updates on the progress we're making within the office, whether it be on kind of key performance indicators for productivity around kind of the commercialization ecosystem, or it could be also about operational matters that we're addressing and advancing within the organization. And then one time a year, we have a meeting in Columbus that's in person, and we bring people together for roughly half a day. And that's when we can have richer conversations, and we do bring forward people from the university that may be able to provide the board greater insight into our innovation ecosystem. And recently we had some of the more entrepreneurial faculty come in and talk about their experiences with the innovation ecosystem with our office and provide insights on how they felt that we can improve. So.
Doug, how often does your board meet?
The goal is twice a year. We've occasionally missed that goal just based on craziness going on, but it's twice a year. Typical agenda is actually very similar, I think, to what both Kelly and Kevin said. We have tried the dinner the night before a couple of times. And interestingly, we often about half the people just are too busy to come, and they're not flying in to be here specifically for the meeting. So it's taking time out of their personal time. But I still push for that a lot. I think there's a lot of value in it. And Kelly, I like your idea of setting aside just a little bit of time for kind of an extra at that dinner. That's a good idea.
One other thing I didn't mention, in thinking about the agendas, and love to hear if you think about this as well, is, so work with, the team and typically my direct reports, we're working on the agenda, a few weeks ahead of time. And then the presentations, like getting the decks. And so then I kind of challenge every person, including myself, like, what are we asking the board in this section? Like, what question are we giving them where we want their feedback? Because I think the agendas are at their worst when it's just us, giving data and reporting out, and they're at the best when there's some component of that, but also like, truly a question or a problem where we need them to, swirl on it for a bit as a group. So I don't have a perfect formula for that, but it is something I try to challenge. And then like the other thing is like set the agenda and then cut a quarter of it out to make more room for those conversations. So like, yeah, so that's something it's not perfected yet, but that would
I
happen.
I'll throw in, yes, I totally agree. In fact, that's what same process as far as the leadership team coming up with all that stuff. And we've moved more and more to not just what's the question, but the why are we talking about this? What's our goal in talking about this thing? And then we try and always end the meeting with, here are some of the action items we think we need. So very, very similar to what Kelly's talking about.
And one thing I'll just add, because we unfortunately we do a lot of information sharing during our board meetings, but we have we have two important executives on our board, and often it's a time for us to be able to present information that they can hear, and they can hear the comments and the feedback from our highly kind of recognized board members, right? So it's good for them to hear us say X, and then have Kirsten or Kathy Koo then say, that's really excellent. Or, I saw this at Michigan, let's say, or Arizona. This might be something that you look at. So in that, we end up getting an endorsement either of what we're doing or where we need to go, which then makes it easier for us to then reapproach our leadership to make progress within the organization.
Yeah, sometimes that outside perspective just helps people hear something that they
Yeah.
maybe can't hear from the inside. So.
Yeah.
Great. So we've talked about composition and structure of the boards now. We're going to move on to operations and management. We're going to try to go through this part a little bit quickly because I really want to get to more outcomes and impact and challenges and lessons learned. But I think it's really important for us to talk more about the operations and management just quickly. So Doug, who owns the relationship day to day, and how much staff time and budget does running the board require?
I would say primarily it's me that owns the relationship. We definitely, it's the senior leadership team that gets involved with everything. And I would say we all have relationships with the individuals. But as far as running the board, making sure it happens, all that kind of stuff, it's me. And I'll generally be the voice going back to the board as a whole. It takes a little bit of admin time to schedule the meeting because they're working across not just our schedules, but all the people on the board trying to figure out what day and times work. Um, and I guess that's most of the answer to the question. I'm not sure if I missed anything.
That's great. Kelly, I know you have a little bit of a different structure because you have the chair.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a chair, so that's one more, kind of, person that we're trying to manage. We also invite a lot of key internal stakeholders. So before we set a meeting, that adds more kind of complexity to the administration. We're making sure it works for my calendar, the board chair's calendar, the vice president for research's calendar. Can we get 1 hour with the university president? So we're trying to manage a few really complicated calendars before we even set the meeting. And then can we get the really nice Regents conference room as well? So we're, it is a bit of time. We, we provide the dinner the night before, and we cater breakfast and lunch for the board members, and we provide, a gift. So, we're budgeting, single digit thousands of dollars to support the hosting. Totally worth it. Absolutely essential. But, we have, those things that we're doing. But, in general, I'm, much like Doug, the interface with the board.
And Kevin, how about for your board, owns the relationship day to day?
Yeah,
I'm going
so
to staff
from an accountability perspective, I own the relationships, and we have someone on our team who is really there to drive all the organization around the board. So we're very fortunate to have a very talented person do that. We also have deployed a software called Boardable, which also allows us to communicate to the board and have all of our information kind of in one place that people can go to. So we found that to be helpful, again, coupled with someone whose job it is to bring people together and ensure that we have a good experience for everyone.
I do really like the boardable. It has made it very easy for me to see kind of across meetings, what's been happening too. So I'll
Good.
just put a plug in for that. So next question was actually about the compensation. We already answered that, but we did have an additional question from the audience about whether you'd provide any travel funds for those who are coming from outside for those meetings. So Kevin, really quickly,
Yeah.
any
Just real
other type of
quickly,
compensation or something else that the board members receive?
if they're traveling to Ohio State, we're covering their costs.
Okay. Kelly?
We're sort of in flux between historical promises that were made and present day. But in general, we're not covering travel costs for anyone except for some historically, once you get to the airport, like we'll book your Uber and that sort of thing, and a handful of people where we're still booking rooms. But like in general, when I'm recruiting new members, the expectation is you're traveling here on your own, and that's sort of a pretty consistent university-wide position. We're a nonprofit university. We're fundraising for a variety of things. This is an area of service and volunteerism to the university that we're asking people to say yes if they can, agree to be here twice a year and cover their costs.
Doug?
And no, we don't. And so therefore, it's one of the reasons we have mostly local people, but it's also what we'll try and do, I'll pick on Kirsten, is try and figure out a time when she might be traveling out here or it makes sense to travel out here and build around that as well.
I love that. That is so useful too. And I think that like lots of people feel that about board meetings in general is like they want to attend them, but when it's just for something that is, a 3 hour meeting, like is that like they're always, thinking about like this travel time, is it worth it? So having things built around something else that's happening in the ecosystem, et cetera, super helpful. Um, Okay, next question, and I'm going to combine two questions, is how do you keep members engaged between meetings, but also how do you measure like if the board is really being effective? So like kind of keeping that engagement going on with them, but also are they being effective members themselves? And Doug, I'm going to start with you here.
The engagement in between is typically follow up on things that have gone on during the meeting, and that's almost all done through email. There are several people on the board that, like I said, are local and we may continue conversations with based on what happened. It's funny, the question about, how do we keep them being useful, engaged and useful? It's kind of funny. I would say the impressive on paper is valuable because that's what like senior leadership would look at and say, well, who are these people and how important are they to the ecosystem? But we've always wanted more, and it's difficult to measure. I don't have any specific measures. Although it's also how responsive are they to things that have gone on during the board, follow-up action items, and kind of goes to Kelly's point about, are they disappearing and not participating? So kind of all of that combined, but we don't have any specific measures.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Same question. Keeping them engaged in between meetings and measuring. that there.
I'll say something that didn't work. One thing that didn't work, we piloted like an AB buddy program where a licensing manager would meet quarterly with an AB member with the idea, like talk about some of the deals you're working on, some of your technologies, see if they've got it. That was awkward and didn't work. And so we tried it, we quietly sunset it. What works better is to have members of the team, licensing managers, ventures people, come to the dinners and like sit and talk to a board member and then just feel more comfortable when they have a problem in their area or an opportunity in their area to give them a call and reconnect and ask that question. So trying to expand the relationships beyond just me to them, so that other members of the team can view them as a resource for their work, has been more impactful at keeping them engaged between meetings. Another is make it easy for them to be engaged between meetings. So we do, from time to time, we'll have a working group about, this problem or this initiative. We're doing another fundraising push for the Accelerate Blue Fund. Who wants to help us review our pitch decks and give us feedback? Like that's an easy yes, and it's really valuable for us and it keeps people engaged. One of the ways our members help us is, again, network connections. So when we're looking for startup founders for our new program, put together a social media kit for the board members. Send it to them, make it easy for them. How do you measure? I don't know, but this is a cool measurement, like something I can point to. We know that we have a University of Michigan startup that connected with our team because they saw a LinkedIn post from one of our National Advisory Board members talking about this cool new startup creation program. So that's great. Can we repeat that? Hopefully.
Great. And I will just note, especially because of how things are going these days, et cetera, is that I have noted, Doug, especially in your meetings too, like there's a very prominent part that is played by the marketing manager with regards to what's happening in the offices. And we're hearing a lot through them. And then, getting to see all these social media posts that they are talking about the things that we've heard about in the advisory board meetings, it helps us, think more about, oh, I should be really promoting this for the institution itself too. So. Kevin, same question to you about keeping the members engaged and measuring whether they're being useful.
So we have subcommittees. So we have an investment committee. We have one focus on governance and operations, and so as appropriate, we'll pull people in to address investment opportunities, or again, there may be special projects that we're working on to improve governance. It does tend to be episodic when we have something come up. For example, um, uh, we had an opportunity to pursue kind of litigation funding. Well, we would take that out then to the board members that we felt had experience in that area, get their advice and counsel, and bring it back in for consideration. So, that said, we also don't try to use the board members too much outside of the 4 times that we engage with them because we know how busy they are, and we want to keep them engaged, but not make them feel like they're kind of being overwhelmed by requests from us.
We really appreciate that. I know that for myself. You guys are really good about the balance, knowing that there is a lot of time involved with the board meetings themselves, but only occasionally asking for things outside of the board meetings. It's very helpful. So I'm going to go to a couple of questions from our audience right now. First, from a smaller office, any recommendations for a small university tech transfer office of 1 to 3 staff members to establish the supportive and strong advisory boards? I know you're all obviously at very large institutions, but I'm curious about your thoughts on how this might work for a smaller institution. And one thing I can just obviously say right off the bat is from everything that you've said is getting some alumni involved. No matter how of a small institution you are or a small university tech transfer office you are, you've got alumni who are interested. Definitely think about who would be appropriate on those sides as far as being in the innovation and commercial sphere. But your thoughts, Kevin, you're nodding your head. Maybe you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I would say I agree. Alumni, keep it small. Like we have resources that can allow us to manage larger boards and have governance and complexity, et cetera. keep it small. I would say if you can get 3 to 5 people, that's great. And I would also leverage your colleges that are engaged in innovation because most likely they have people already giving or alums that are innovative that they can recommend to your board, and that can help connectivity also with your customers on campus.
Great. Anyone else want to
Yeah,
put in there?
I'll just throw out a thought, and that's I was slightly different than what Kevin said, is I wouldn't base the size of the board on the size of your operations, other than, like you said, Kevin, about you got to be able to manage it. Um, I think it should be based on your university's focus on commercialization. Because it would be, if you believe you should be growing or have more resources, a strong board might help you accomplish that. So that's, I don't know, that's what I was thinking.
Great. Kelly, anything to add? No. All right. Another question from the audience is, do any of these boards help you interact with advancement offices at all? Which I know is sometimes a relationship that a lot of universities and innovation operations have been trying to work on more is working with their advancement offices. But anyone have any thoughts on that? Whether their boards have been helpful with that? No. All
So
right.
I think we could have a whole webinar about that topic. We do a lot of work with our, here we call it development, fundraising office. Our board is not a fundraising board. That we don't require any donations. Some have made donations. Their role is primarily in helping us to launch and with the strategy for the things we will fundraise for. And then we kind of periodically go back to them and tell them how the fundraising is going. And, we actually invite our advancement development people who are supporting us to portions of the meeting. Like if we're going to be talking about something we're fundraising for, we invite them to come to that session. So it is useful in that regard as well.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Another question from the audience, and Kelly, I'm going to put this one to you because I know you have an inherited board. But it says you all seem to have good control of your boards. What about an inherited board that has different views of their roles, or if the members or are alumni or donors or influential and have their own views of what you should be doing, which you may not find helpful? How do you handle these boards, perhaps that have come in and maybe have a different mindset than you have, or your view of the board? And Kelly, I'll start with you, but Kevin, I think that this may also be a good question for you as well.
Yeah, I remember when I came into this role, someone said, you've inherited Ken Nesbitt was my predecessor. You've inherited Ken's board. You need to make it your board. I was just very fortunate. I think he had selected like amazing people. The board members to a person told me they were happy to submit their resignation and let me start with a new board. I was like, no, please don't do that. So I think this comes back to leaning on your board, like having a good board chair can help you with it sounds like, some of the questions are more like about a rogue member who's not aligned with, the vision of the office. Some challenging in the meetings is good, challenging of initiatives and ideas, but you really don't want someone who's being negative about everything you're trying to do. So I fortunately haven't experienced that, but I would say that can be a role for the board chair to kind of shield you from that and to help move that person, help them be more productive in the meetings or move out.
Kevin, you want to answer the same
Yeah,
question?
just quickly, we did, I inherited a board of, again, primarily local people. They were all excellent. And yet, we needed to take it in a different direction. And what I found was, um, you know, in time, we kind of let them know that we were going in a different direction. And just with a heart of gratitude for their service and a recognition of the good that they've brought to the board in Ohio State, I met with each of them, and we effected the transition, and we want to find other ways then to engage them at the university. So it was challenging in many ways, but but it was necessary, and I can say that we were fortunate to have good people that we were both exiting and bringing on. So
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So we are at the top of the hour. We put this slide up because it has everyone's email addresses on it. We'll go ahead and just send your email addresses, I think, along with the information when we send it out next week or later this week. I'm not sure when it'll go out. Because we have another 15 minutes on your calendars, we're going to go ahead and because we have not gotten to all of our questions at all, we're going to go ahead and talk for another 15 minutes. But I know a lot of people are going to have to sign off now, but the recording will go out to everyone afterwards and they can see the answers to your last questions. I will note that another person had suggested for their boards, what they would do is they would take the board to visit a lab each meeting. So that's another idea of what you can do to get your boards kind of like into like the actual fantastic innovation that is happening at each of your institutions. So all right, we'll take the slide down and we'll give this another 15 minutes. We're not getting to all of our questions at all. No surprise, but we'll get as much in as we can in the last 14 minutes now that we have together. So, Kelly, I'm going to start with you on this one. What's a specific example where board input changed a licensing decision, startup strategy, or commercialization approach that you had? So we're really talking now about the outcomes and the impact that the board itself has had for you at your institution.
Sure. So I can think of two examples. So one years ago when we were putting together and kind of bolstering up our licensee compliance program, we were going to, we were hiring someone to do that work. And so we were talking to the board about what the position was going to be. It was going to be new. This was going to be someone following up with our licensees, making sure we had, gotten all of the reports and everything in order under the license. And the board, said, don't call it a licensee compliance specialist. Call it a licensee engagement specialist. Like helped us kind of reorient it because it was going to be something new coming to our licensees, a new specialized point of contact, more communication from our office, more proactive compliance. So that's just, it seemed really logical to us, like compliance or like, no, engagement. That's what we want to hear. A second time, perhaps more consequential, we were pitching to the board, like, giving our first pitch that we wanted to use to go and lobby within our state legislature to ask for funding for our venture fund. And the board said, that's a good pitch, but your strategy is all wrong. U of M can't go do this alone. There's actually other funds like yours in the state. You should build a coalition. And, 3 years later, a lot of work, a lot of coalition building, 5 nonprofit evergreen funds like ours were successful in getting $60 million from the state to fund that activity. That ended up with just over $10 million to our office. So again, back to metrics, that could be one. I really don't think it would have happened with the original strategy that we were honestly prototyping with them. But they really drove us and helped us outside of the meetings to build that coalition. And that was ultimately successful.
Thanks, Kelly. Kevin, and what are some specific things you can point to where the board has been helpful to the university?
yeah, they're a little bit different direction from the standpoint that, wrestling with questions of policy and as well as work on the enforcement side. So on the policy side, we really needed to determine how we were going to approach the selling of shares or equity when we would, when we would receive them. And, do you hold and try to make decisions of timing? Do you sell it all? Do you do something in between? And so having the collective experience of the board to help us think through that and navigate it was very helpful. A second area would be on the enforcement and monetization front. We are a disciplined office. It's important to us. I mean, in those areas. And so considering the pros and cons and where things have gone well and things have not gone well, um, when you're pursuing an enforcement action or pursuing monetization, that's been another area that's been very helpful.
Great, thanks. Doug, other areas.
Um, there's myriad times when their feedback has helped us. The only kind of specific thing I can think of off the top of my head is when our strategic planning, when they've provided support and insight into things that we should or shouldn't be focused on and how we form that strategic plan around it.
Thanks, Doug. All right, I'm going to go on to challenges and lessons learned in building this board. Helping people not maybe make the mistakes that you have made in any of this, since your operations have been around for a while with this. So, Kevin, what's a mistake or misstep you made in building or running the board, and what did you change afterwards?
So I'll say, and this really kind of predate, it was a transition of me coming into the presidency. I think we made a mistake historically by not having board meetings on a regular basis, like creating discipline and expectations around the board engagement. And, it is very busy and it is easy for us. We have 4 meetings, which is quite a few. And I think we lost out on a lot of value because we ourselves weren't disciplined internally. And so that's one thing I would just call out. Um, I think another would be how to, I think at times we could have done a better job of informing the board of the internal politics and kind of what's happening behind the scenes within the institution so that there's greater context when they come into the meeting and they understand what's happening with our university directors. And I say that not to, manipulate things or, create a kind of force an outcome. It's just sometimes you have to have that context to offer your best counsel and advice. And so I'd say that's something that we could have done better and we could do better going forward.
All right, thanks. Kelly, same question to you. Mistake or misstep?
I'm just trying to think of how you would give someone a primer on the politics influencing the university and the office. Oh my goodness.
You can't do the whole thing. That's a master's or a PhD program. So
Yeah. Well, I talked about our failed buddies program, so don't try that. I think, and I talked a little bit about this too. I think a mistake I made early on was, too much presentation, not enough time for conversation. That's something we're trying to get right. I think I early on took on too much myself, like I was talking, I was the one running every aspect of the meeting and really empowering and putting more of that content delivery on the members of the team. And that also just helps create more relationships with the board, more comfort in reaching out. One of the things we do that might be helpful is we have an executive session at the end of each board meeting. And everyone leaves, like the board can even ask me to leave. Usually I stay, but like the office leaves, and often the vice president for research will stay, but everyone else goes. And that's when the board, really tells us like what's on their mind, what are they thinking. Sometimes it might be something like, this person is extremely talented. What's your retention strategy for them? Tell us how you're thinking about that. That's often the conversation. And so this concept of a, short and sweet 30-minute executive session, that could also be, where we could talk about, well, this is why it might have felt weird in this part of the meeting. These are the politics that are influencing that.
Thanks, Kelly. Important, and I think that's an important part to add is about that executive session where um, there's a little bit more freedom to be able to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, we all
Doug,
kind of move closer to the table.
we
We
do.
turn the Zoom off, turn the microphones off.
Yeah. Doug, mistake or missteps in building or other?
It's probably it's repetitive, I think, a little bit. I think initially just being a spewing thing where we're just laying out information and that's the expectation. Changing that to expectations of the board. That I think that's a really valuable change to make, is focus on what do you expect from the board? What do you want them to do? How do you want them engaged? I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay, great, thanks. And I'm going to ask three more questions. We've got 5 minutes. I'm going to try to make these pretty quick then. So, Doug, are there any tensions that have come up between board recommendations and institutional or university constraints?
I'd say in our case, relatively few. The biggest tensions, I would say, are related to budget issues that have been going on within the university. And, the board's desire to help with that. And on the other hand, the problems that could create if they're going to senior leadership and complaining about my budget. So I think that's probably the primary tension that we'll see. Other than that, aside from one case where we had two members of my staff arguing different sides of the same topic, I think there's been relatively few tensions. I think we handle it pretty well.
Yeah. Kelly or Kevin, do you have anything to add there?
I'll just double down on what Doug said. This board is not there primarily to help you solve your budget problem. Like, putting your boss or the university leadership on the spot while you talk to the board about your budget problems is not a good convincing long-term strategy. And so that it is a challenge. Our staffing is always a challenge, and our boards always want to help us grow because they care about what we do. But that's not the way the budget model decisions are made,
Thanks.
sadly, or else we would have no funding problems if our board got to set my budget.
All right. Oh yeah. No, we have lots of ideas. What else your operations could be doing for sure.
Oh, yes.
Kevin, I'm going to go to like for institutions that don't. So a lot of I think the institutions that who we're on today don't yet have an advisory board. Kind of what's the minimum viable version you think worth starting with?
Yeah, I think minimum viable would be five. I would keep it odd, an odd number. And again, if you can get to five and grow from there, I think that's a good approach.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Kelly and Doug? I mean, you got to have enough voices in the room that have enough breadth of experience, right?
The only thing I'd add is the board looks at themselves as pretty important people, and you probably you don't want to take shortcuts and bring the wrong people on the board. So just get some impactful people on the board, even if it's a few number.
Yeah.
And
And I will just, sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
I would just add quickly, like, try to, if you can, get the highest level partner you can in this. Like, if you can get the university president to like issue the invitations and come to the meetings, use the creation of the board as an opportunity to elevate the office's profile within the institution. That would be, I think maybe my highest advice.
And I will say, so someone who's serving on a board, for me, so not only am I getting to see, what's happening across these different, amazing institutions and help them with what it is that I'm seeing, but I am also making connections to very different people. I have no crossover in between my boards and other people who are associated with them. And so for me, it's also really interesting and helpful in that way as well, having these relationships that are built through these board memberships. So that's just a plug for those who are board members, why it is actually an incredibly valuable potential thing for you to be doing if you're considering it. So we have 1 minute left. Final pieces of advice that you have for anyone who are considering putting together a board or things not to do. You've already talked about that some. Kevin?
I would say reach out to your peers, peer offices, reach out to us and kind of get more information on best practices and how we got things started in different areas. We're all willing to help and contribute. So
One of the wonderful things about this community. Doug?
Ask Kirsten.
Yeah.
In all seriousness.
I'm serious. I think you're a great addition to the board. I think obviously given limitations on your time, but um and then I just echo everything Kevin said. I think there's a lot of thought that should go into it.
Well, thank you. Kelly.
Start with a great board chair and build from there.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you doing this. I'm sorry we went longer than we had planned to. And I know we didn't even get to, I think, a good chunk of our questions. But we will write this up into a short piece as well for people. But I know that most people these days, they love to watch these. So I'm sure this is going to be around in perpetuity for people to help them establish their own boards. But please do follow up with our board, panelists if you do have any questions for them. We will send out those email addresses again to everyone. So thank you all so much for your time for this. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.